This is the Visiting Writers Reading Series, Spring 2017. We have this great event here this semester with a couple of poets. They were very generous to provide books for students who come to the reading, probably other students as well. So first I'm going to introduce, so this event is sponsored by the College of Arts and Sciences, the English department as well. So we're very happy for that. I want to remind you to put your phones on silent, if possible, so we don't hear any ringing. And first, let me introduce Sjohnna McCray. He was born and raised in the Midwest. He received his MFA from the University of Virginia and has a master's degree from Teachers College, Columbia University. McCray was the winner of the AWP Intro Journal Award. So the AWP, for those of you who would not know, is the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. So it's the biggest association of writers in the United States, but it also, welcomes international writers. So that's, he won this award. And the Ohio University's Emerson Poetry Prize. His debut collection, Rapture, and we have copies here, was selected for the 2015 Walt Whitman Award of the Academy of American Poets. McCray lives and teaches in Savannah, Georgia. So welcome, Sjohnna.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I'm glad to be sharing the stage with Sandra. The first poem that I wanted to read is about a friend of mine from high school. I went to performing arts high school, and so this friend was a dancer, and he went on to dance for the Dance Theater of Harlem. And I had lost touch with him. And so, you can Google anything now. So I Googled him, and I learned that he had died of AIDS. And what I wanted to do was write a poem where you take this person who's a ballet dancer, and they move to New York, and they're in their physical prime, and you've got this city where anything is possible. And when those two things meet, what happens? So this is called Balanchine's Prodigal Son for Calvin Sean Lander's Dance Theater of Harlem. On his first night in Manhattan, he dons an acid-washed jean jacket, turns up the collar, and stands on the 1-9 train even though there are more than enough seats. White tank top, jeans cuffed at the bottom, and combat boots. Lightly, he treads the pavement pocked with blackened gum like stage marks. Through the white tile tunnel and up the steps onto 42nd Street, he emerges into radiance. If this were a Broadway play, his imperious grace would assume first position on the corner, maybe a pas de bourrée Carew through the crosswalk, ending with a grand jeté in front of an American flag composed entirely of neon lights. Could it begin any other way? The ticker of the stock exchange relays the world's worth, and Adonis's billboard, abs cut in shadows and digitally retouched crotch, hangs above him. Like so many that fall to the elixir of lights of this corporate-sponsored space station, he sees the promise inherent in the landscape, the technological address of desire, the gravity of the Midwest behind him, the weightlessness of youth in his gait. He takes a small pas de chat for mankind. One of the things, one of the first poems that I had ever published as an undergraduate was about my father. He had had his leg amputated from diabetes. And so, you know, I had a hard time looking at this leg. But my brother, who was 5, I mean, kids have no problems with gross things like spiders and snakes and all these things. They just grab a hold. And so I was watching my brother and I thought of this. And this poem is called How to Move. I cannot look at anything so black as my father's leg, or used to be leg below the knee, now a stump. If a child's doll lost its flexible hand, the surface underneath would be as round as father's stump. I've touched it once. And my brother, who is 5, is not afraid to touch the stump. Men on the corner used to holler that Dad was a high yellow nigger, or if the sun had darkened him and pulled the red to the surface of his skin, a red nigger. I am thinking of colors because the prosthesis comes in colors. My father's first leg was the color of oatmeal, maybe the color of peaches, khaki, yellow, and pink, a simulated sunset. I am thinking of technicians with photographs creating perfect shades of Negro-ness for limbless Negroes, every Negro matched to a swatch or chart with names like fingernail polish. When my brother touches the stump that is shrunk and hardened to look like an oversized, uncircumcised penis. When my brother takes the brown, almost black debris of our father's life into small hands that marvel at catching spiders in jars, he is not afraid. When we discover death shaking in the gravel driveway, he knows it immediately. The dark gray body of the robin, the red and slightly pink shaggy belly, the fuzz of the robin's round belly, like the fuzz of new tennis balls. The robin is on its side with the right wing moving slowly, back and forth. At the same time, the beak is opening and closing. There's hardly any sound, no song except the sound of short, jagged gasps. All elements are working in unison. Wing moving back and forth, beak opening and closing, the rhythm inherent in knowing and not knowing when anything is coming, but wanting to finish it gracefully, even while dying. But maybe grace has nothing to do with it. Maybe it's desire that pulls our limbs, the robin's wing on concrete, to fly even in the shadow of a man and a boy, the boy with his eyes out of his mind, celestial. Maybe the desire is to show us how to move. When we are at home, my brother takes the stump in his arms, holds on to it like a prize or an unexpected gift that Father has given us. One of the things that this book is about is it's about my father, who was a Vietnam veteran, who was stationed in South Korea, who met my mother, who was a comfort woman in South Korea. And if you don't know, a comfort woman is a prostitute. What would happen is the South Korean government would sort of take these poor rural women and sort of draft them to sort of become sex workers for the U.S. soldiers stationed in Korea. And so that's what the first half of this manuscript is about. This poem is called Bedtime Story Number 1, and it takes place in Seoul, Korea, and the year is 1971. Father gave her a little extra. How could she not fall for him? He was handsome, but still a boy. In the depot where soldiers took such women, his skinny body clung too close to hers, and his narrow ass still belonged to his mother. The other men knew the routine and how much to pay. She loathed their accent and American swagger. The sweat would barely cool and dry before another shook the cot and bucked his hips out of rhythm in some other time zone. However, he began to offer other things, besides money. He brought sweets from the base. And the minute he touched his pocket, the face she reserved for his English crumbled like sweet toffee. Because he didn't know how to say what he wanted to say, no time was spent on uneasiness. Chocolate, caramel, and peanuts spoke best, secured his place. He hooked his arms through hers as if they could stroll the lane like an ordinary couple, the unassuming black and the Korean whore in the middle of the Vietnam War. Comfort Woman, Seoul, Korea, 1971. This is something my mother knew. To fuck a man without a metaphor, without even the slightest hint of a story, is to be at the center of two deaths. To see with her eyes is to see as a camera lens stripped of gauze, the unwelcome influx of light, reducing men to texture, the prickly hairs, the moles and bumps, the scarred trenches along the shoulders. Each pause is wish for things unsaid. The bed springs in their frailty squeak. Thank God, you whore. Thank God. Yellow apples. She brings yellow apples and stands outside the motel in the same lime dress he's seen her in the last 6 times, cinched at the waist and modestly cut. And if she stands perfectly still, maybe he'll overlook her cheap black flats where the outline of each toe makes her vulnerable, even done up with her hair curled. It's late evening. A mild breeze runs down the hill, and moonlight falls on her crumpled bag, which sags a little from the apples. For a moment, she forgets why she's standing there, diaphragm and condoms in her purse. I'd like to read a couple love poems. This poem, my mother and my father separated later on, and he took up with another woman. And when I was 18, he brought my brother home. Here's a baby, here's your brother. And so I had to babysit, and I had never cared for a baby before. And so I was always thinking that I was going to kill the baby. So this is a poem that sort of combines 2 images, and it's called Next to Him. It's not about the sex, really. It's not the ache of the bruised nipple or the burn left by his 2-day-old beard in the crook of my neck where the pulse is taken. It's his breathing when asleep that draws me near. When I was 17, I'd check beside me, hope I hadn't rolled and squashed flat my 1-year-old brother. His sigh on my ear, the rise and fall of air beneath his ribs, was a miracle to me. The nightly surprise of what I saw under the bulb's dim glow. I saw the small heart beating, like wings unfolding in the body. Here, with this man, ideas of flight return. When I had written this poem, I wanted to sort of use the idea of flashbacks, and I wanted it to be like sort of dramatic and like a foreign film, like black and white. So it's called In Need of Subtitles. Because I can never say anything plainly, because I always stutter politely, because there's always the chatter before the kiss, I want him to know I'll wait. Like the dames in old MGM films wrapped in scarves and wisps of cigarette smoke, he turns, smiles, and waves. He boards the plane. It's all there in his wrist, the eagerness to go. As the plane turns to make its ascent, My fingers remember the strings, holding the pick in one hand, the idea of strumming in my head. How to make the two connect as he rumbles away, my cargo as much as the planes. He moves my wrist, positions my finger with the pick, presses down on the nail determining the note. I think he has a seat by the window, shadow in a body that hovers, face pressed to the glass and kissing my ass goodbye, good riddance. He moves my wrist up and down again and laughs. Enough about guitars, I say. His forearm brushes my fingers, or is it my fingers that brush his forearm? No one ever imagines. The tendons is soft, but that's the skin, I suppose. What will he play without me? I don't know if you're too young to remember Bob Ross. Bob Ross is, he used to be on PBS, and he had this gigantic, he was this white guy who had this gigantic afro. And literally he would sit down and paint, and you were supposed to paint with him. And so as a kid, I loved Bob Ross. So this poem is called Burning Down Suburbia, an ode to Bob Ross. When I was younger, I watched the world blend on PBS. The painter with the Jufro hypnotized me. With a thumb hooked through the palette, he painted forward from the base coat, like a god might use a blueprint. Behind the image is always the word light. On top came tiny crisscross strokes of phthalo blue, a rapturous pinwheel of words, unveiled sky. Two sharp strokes of titanium white, slashed with gray from the master's knife, became wings, gulls taking flight. I begged for nothing but paints that summer. Already equipped with an afro, I sat before the paper and the cakes of color and tried to figure out the path to cerulean, the wrist twist to evergreens, and the motion for clouds. The oversaturated paper dried and cracked with the fine lines of lightning. The worlds he reproduced might as well have been Asgard or Olympus. How I longed for a visit. Might he come, armed with a paintbrush and dressed in a button-down, to be soothed by his voice and taken, lured from the dining room table and shown the suburb's majesty. Look, son, he might say, at the pile of autumn leaves, the shade on that forest green trash bag. Using his 2-inch brush, he'd blend the prefab homes on the hill until they seemed mysterious, folded hues of Prussian blue, Van Dyke brown, and a blaze of alizarin crimson. And then the last poem I'd like to read is called Father as Jellyfish. One of the things that started to happen, my friends started to have children, and one of my first male friends had a son, and I was talking to him, and when he was describing sort of like his feelings about his son, I thought, you know, what did my father think when I was a baby and he was looking down at me? And so this is called Father as Jellyfish. My son shivers in the babble of dreams. For now, he only knows a few things: rough beard, blankets, and breasts. He grips the world in his hands. Soon enough, he'll spend words the way the nouveau riche burn money, with haste and an impracticality for fashion. The jargon of the schoolyard, snap, crackle, plop, bling in the mouth, meaning askew. Later, he'll strike pose after endless pose, insecurity, pride, and lust. His door will shut. He'll figure if he's like most men, average penis, thin arms, a basic understanding of math. Will he work? Be an intellectual? Will he break the earth with those soft hands? But tonight, behind the bars of his crib, he is a prince in the kingdom of rhymes. From under the sea, he sees me, hovering head and tentacles, bloated and ripe with meaning. As sleep descends, I arrange myself, floating near the shore of his life. Like stars, like hurdles, like gravity, stingers in place. I wait. Thank you.